If you'd like that song, you're welcome anyway. This is Steve McEvely, Vince McEvely's son. Yeah. And we have Gerard Moran, Father Gerard Moran down there in the back as well. Sagraton America, August Bridge Street, Foch Road, and there are a few other people that don't know. Rosie is here, we said that already. I go back that way, I don't know if that man was. Would you like to? Well, I know the man behind you will anyway. Ger Reidy, if I may. Or if you may.
Sure, there. I remember in my old job I used to work in town here. There was a species called the town engineer here years ago. And you had a title and you had to wear a tie, but you had no money to do anything in the town. So you kind of got an awful lot of grief from councillors once every month, and you got about 2 pages in the Mayo News. And it's all good fun, really, looking back on it. And we used to get, all we could do then was plant flowers because they were cheap, and we had these things called a social employment scheme going because everybody used to come in, then there was no work. And we ended up planting trees and flowers, and we had to cut the grass. There was a big deal about grass cutting, but at these special meetings I'd be castigated for not maintaining the greens. And Richard stood up at the back of the crowd and said, "What's wrong with the briars and the bottlons and the ragwort?" He said, "Aren't they beautiful? Aren't they enormous?" And we all laughed and said, "Who is this guy?" And he said, "Everybody gives out about the briars, but they'll all eat the blackberries." And we thought, who is this guy? I thought he was great because it would get me off the hook and some other stuff. But anyway, who knows that all these years later he's been proven to be right on the medal, on the button. Because when I travel around Europe now, what do I see in the middle of Warsaw on the square? A big bottle waving in the breeze. Or if I go to Berlin, what do I see but ragwort? And then when it's interesting to see everybody's still cutting grass here, but actually we outside Trinity College in Dublin we have to bow down to Trinity. It's very important. Whatever they do in Trinity we have to replicate it, you know. But there's wildflowers and ragwort growing outside Trinity College in Dublin as well. So Richard White is way ahead of the class.
Well done, Richard. Can you get a bit into Westport?
Well, I can organise some. I have some out the road there.
If you're good stalks.
Yeah. But anyway, I became a Covey for I live out in the bogs of Ahagori, you see, as many of you might know. But I was kind of a token Covey for 12 times every year when I come into the cattle fair every year with cattle, you know. And I know one guy down there who would know a little bit about cattle fairs, but there wouldn't be too many people now put their hands up and said they brought cattle into Westport a while back. There's another one here. I knew your brother well, he was a great man on the cattle as well.
Oh, you did?
But we all had our own space in town, and you couldn't encroach on anybody else's space. And you had to kind of wake up the cattle, because the cattle were used to kind of dozing around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They'd wonder, what the hell is this guy doing, getting us out of the field and chasing us into town? And there were all kinds of unusual characters, and Tony, my brother down there, has a great song about the fair day in Westport. But sometimes when you're talking about the fair days, one time they say, "I wish we all know about that stuff." But now when you talk about the fair days, you know, it's a long time ago now, so people haven't, you kind of have to refresh their memories on it. So I'm going to read a poem about the old fair days, going back then. I was thinking about the old town council I used to be on too. I got this job here back in the 80s, and Brody Gibbons was a great Covey years ago. He had a very wry joke about coming to Westport. He said, "Mr. Reidy," they used to call me Mr. Reidy going back then. "You're welcome to Westport, Mr. Reidy. The reservoir is dry and the dump is on fire." It took me a long time to figure out that the reason why the reservoir was dry is because we were putting out the dump, you see, out with the water. But there was good overtime putting out the dump. I discovered that later. It's the kind of thing you won't read in a book, you know, you won't learn in college. So anyway, this poem, if I can take it out here and put on my glasses, will you hold that a minute? Sure. This poem is called November Day, and November Day was the big day in Westport years ago. You had to, if you didn't get paid on November Day, you could have a kind of a quiet Christmas, you know. And so it was important to sell on November Day, and the buyers knew that as well. We used to come in around the bridge, you know, and my father used to work in the Irish Stone Cotton Company factory on Altamont Street. And he spent most of his lifetime looking up at the railway station. And ironically enough, I got a job where the factory was, and I spent a lot of my life looking up at the railway station as well. So it's a very strange thing how life goes round in a big circle. But we used to come in on the bridge now to Monstridge into Covey land, you know, I'd be a bit scared passing people because it was like coming into Times Square, you know, I'd come to town once a month. And the buyers would be, you know, they'd offer you maybe £65 for the cattle or something. And no young man, to be honest, Northern accent, no young man, you made a big mistake not taking that deal. And I'd be very scared because my father would say, Jesus, why didn't you take that, you know? And then you come into town and he'd offer you £60. You see, maybe 2 hours after, you think, Jesus. And then you come back to 2 hours again, you get offered the 65 again, you know. So it's a psychological thing going on. But you didn't know when you were 14 what the hell was happening, you know. So anyway, that's a very long introduction to the poem November Day. On mornings like these we disturbed the red whiteheads, content as the hares played and crows perched on their backs. We marched them to the gate through a pocket of dawn fog. The neighbours' cattle curious followed them to a field corner. They leaped and raced down the road, sentries posted at all the gaps. When a pigeon fluttered in the hedge, they were scared into the bog. Bikes abandoned in the briars, we leaped over the ditch and galloped up the hill as the train from Westport trundled by. At the crossroads we'd meet McHale, leading a dry cow with a halter, his black suit shining with time, laden with his mother's instructions. Our space is outside Mrs. Murphy's house, a windowsill collected dung pyramids. Under the town clock we saw geese peer sideways through hose and canvas bags. One day we met coming from the fair Gillespie, riding the mare with the cart empty behind, and McHale sleeping in the Volkswagen with the calf sucking his ear. Suspended on a bar stool in McGing's, I saw a pale winter sunshine discover cornflakes and bags of seed oats as an old woman chewed tobacco on the stairs. Among the dark angular figures, my father has paid a few notes, peeled from a wad of 20s, with Tavis ghost smiling everywhere.
Well done. Well done. Thanks, Joe.